we're gonna hop right into this. So the first thing to address on the list of things to do for the competition car before it goes off to FabMac is make another subframe. So previously I had used this jig and I made this subframe to put my 488 diff in this subframe. Worked great, didn't have any issues with it until about, I don't know, 2 or 3 days before the FDF Maple Leaf shootout a few years back. I cracked this piece of DOM tubing here running across the top. In hindsight, this wasn't strong enough because initially I didn't have this bracing here. I just had the tube and this piece here that actually clamps into the diff cover and mounts it. So with that being said, I got a couple new subframes that are sandblasted. They're OEM right now. We're gonna cut them up. We're gonna fit them on this jig here. And we're gonna make a V2 version of the subframe. Knowing what we know now, where we need to improve it strength-wise, we're gonna improve that. Another adjustment I made is I just fabbed up a few pieces here just to independently hold the differential in the subframe jig. That way I always know where my axle center is and my drive shaft, flange here, pinion center. It's really important that these locations don't change within the subframe itself, obviously because that directly affects our driveline angle. So now I can put the differential in the subframe, knowing that's where it needs to be in relation to the 4 mounting points. And I can actually pre-cut the subframe since I know what I need to remove. So like this whole section and this whole section, and then we can build it to the jig. So we got our diff mounted here in the subframe jig. As you can see, like I mentioned, built some structures here that help locate the pinion as well as the axle stubs as if they were previously mounted in the subframe. So we know that the location is never going to change. Now we can mount the subframe independently of the diff and build up to the differential, which should make it more repeatable and easier in the future. So let's cut up one of these subframes, get it mounted on the jig, and start cutting some tube. All right guys, so here is where we are at with the subframe. So I have the front jig piece right here. I have that off right now just so I can kind of show you guys what's going on. So obviously you can see the diff is kind of slanted forward right now because of that. But I was actually able to retain the entire bottom section, because this is upside down right now, of the OEM subframe, which is awesome. Because on this old one, I actually didn't do that. I had cut it out and boxed it. This time I actually was able to retain that. You can see I've cut out the section here on either side where the OEM bushings go. And then I've actually come up with a solution to hang the diff in here. So we're gonna box all this in. I have this piece here that's gonna secure the diff with 2 big nut and bolt going through. And yeah, it should work out really well. I'm super stoked that I'm able to retain this whole piece because I can use this as a jacking point instead of the diff, and which is nice, but also just because this will help retain some of the structural rigidity and the geometry of the diff and subframe together. So stoked on that. That's kind of today's project. We're going to plate the intersection here and get our mounting solution for the front 2 bushings done. And then in the rear, we can tackle the piece of DOM that we're going to tie into the mount here on the rear of the diff cover. Got a bit of an interrupter. Got the guard dog on duty. Yes. Buy Slip Club merch. Buy all my shit. Retained the OEM piece here, cut out this section and boxed it. So I've got all that just tacked in. That's made it a one piece that I've just bent. You see all the tack welds there. Same with this side. And then in order to get these bolts through, I just have holes drilled out through the top. And obviously this is the bottom of the diff, which is nice because when you unbolt it, you can support it and the bolts will fall right out with gravity. And I'm just gonna put a piece of tube in here so that way I can't get lost inside this structure. So that will be pretty good and easy to do. Next step is I've made this piece here that kind of goes around the diff, as you guys can see, just to kind of like cup it and secure it. And that's what's actually gonna secure the diff to the subframe. So just need to essentially secure it to this piece of section here that I've notched out on either side. And once I find the most efficient and strongest way to do that, then our whole front section of this diff is done, which in my opinion is the hardest section to do, just because there's so much stuff to kind of work around. And then we can move on to the back, where I've already cut out the OEM rear bar. And like I said, we're gonna replace that with a piece of DOM tube that's going to tie into the LPW diff cover that I have back here and mount. All right, so we're wrapping up the back half of the subframe now. I'm gonna show you guys what we got going on. We should be wrapping this up today. This should be the last section of the video. I'm excited to get this thing all tacked up. We're gonna do obviously a test fit in the car, in the chassis, just to make sure all our tolerances and clearances are right. And if that checks out, then we can take it out and burn it all in. So let's see what we got going on here. So front, this plate is tacked in, securing the two front diff bushings. I had to notch this, burn that in, obviously. I had to notch a section out of the top here so that we can get the pinion flange out. And what I did last year is get this tube situated and tacked. So this is 1 3/4 120 wall DOM tubing. And yeah, it wasn't that bad. 15-degree bend on either end, 5.5 inches into the tube. And I had to do a very custom notch in here because, as you guys can probably see from this angle, hopefully, the radius from here to here is obviously significantly different, and there's multiple angles at play because the subframe actually bends here too. So this wasn't a tube that I could just put in a tube notcher and notch. It was one of those things where I kind of had to actually make a template. And what I did is I took a piece of toilet paper, the inner cardboard piece for the roll, and that actually slid right over this 1 3/4, and I used that as an initial template to get kind of just my rough notch for where I wanted it to land on this piece of subframe. And that at least got me close enough in a starting point that it didn't take as much time to like kind of slowly work away at each notch on either end. Then we got the depth in where we want it, got it leveled, got it nice and close to the diff where I want it at a good height. And we're pretty happy with that. So the last kind of couple things we're working on here, got some gussets cut out for the corners, as well as some pieces that are going to go on the inside as well, down in here, just to kind of tie it in here and here, make it a little bit more structurally sound. And then obviously we got to tie in a way to secure this diff mount on the back of the cover here to this bar. And so got a little template here, some CAD, cardboard aided design. And it's gonna kind of sit like that. And then obviously there'll be 2 holes and it's gonna go through here and get fastened. Now, here's the thing. I mentioned that I wanted to try and retain this because my previous subframe I couldn't. Looking at it now, being that this is upside down, with a mount here that's gonna be open on top, the hope is that this is gonna slide out and up. But looking at the constraints with this piece and retaining this piece, it's pretty unlikely that's going to happen. So there is a good chance that I'm going to have to cut a section out of the middle here in order to be able to get this diff out from the bottom of the car for serviceability. It's not the end of the world, and the reason being is that because this plate is attached to the diff here in 2 pieces and it goes across, as well as the fact that you guys probably can't see it too well, but we have that piece of tubing in the front. Couldn't really see it from that angle, but we have a piece of tubing in the front that's also tying it in. This isn't necessarily needed structurally, because when the diff is secured to this piece that's welded in as well as tied into the bottom, it's tying in the diff left to right into the subframe, and that's kind of providing the rigidity. So this was just kind of a bonus. I was almost just kind of challenging myself to see how much of the OEM subframe I could retain, but it's obviously not necessarily. It will be strong enough without it. So we're gonna see. I'm gonna try and pull the diff out with the mount in here when it's tacked, but just looking at it now, it looks pretty unlikely that I'm gonna be able to retain this piece here. But it is what it is. I'm still stoked on how it looks. So let's make the back mounts and get everything fit up and tacked up, and we'll see how she's looking. All right. I kind of skipped some stuff, but I didn't think it was super important to show me building it anyways, but here's where we're at. Got this rear piece all situated on the back of the diff cover, so it captures it right where the bolts go through here. So I'm stoked on that. It's burned into the bar. Also triangulated in each corner here where it mounts to the subframe, this piece of DOM that we tied in here. These guys are burned in. These are just tacked in so I can get to them later when the diff is out. Right now, just working on a piece that's gonna go right about there, and it's gonna triangulate this structure that we made here and just kind of mount flush, just like that. We're obviously gonna bevel it, weld it in, and then there'll obviously be one on the left side there. So there's one on either side, and that's just gonna help reduce the amount of stress that's all gonna be in one area here. If we were to not do that, by triangulating it, we're kind of spreading out that load throughout this piece of DOM. And I think that combined with these guys in here should be good. Another little thing I did was just capped the end of the pieces of the subframe here that are traditionally open, just to avoid the stress that's on this, potentially collapsing this piece here in this way. Once we get these pieces tied in here, it's gonna be time to take the subframe off the jig and test fit it in this beer can of a car. All right, what up? We are back working on the subframe and had to make some adjustments. Kind of what I first saw happening, but as you guys can see here, had to cut off the top, just ended up capping these, and the reason being was that exactly like I predicted, the diff wouldn't come out with the OEM brace still in here. So here it is, chop that out. Not worried about structural rigidity though, because with this piece of DOM here tying into this plate and then this being welded into either side with this box, I think that when the diff is torqued in here, it's gonna be holding it pretty sturdy right to left. So front's all sorted out. And then on the back side, triangulated this piece to the DOM. Really happy with that turned out there, as well as triangulated it in here and here. This one's burned in, this one's just tacked in. So we're good now to start test fitting this in the car. So that's exactly what we're gonna do. I'm gonna unbolt it from my jig and we're gonna plop it in this unit and just clearance everything, see what fits, what doesn't fit. From my recollection, the only thing that it's gonna touch is this. And from what I remember, we're just gonna have to clearance a little section of this piece here on the chassis, which is not needed anymore anyways, because these holes here are for the OEM BMW aluminum diff brace, subframe brace, and that's not needed anymore. So not a big deal. We're gonna get this thing on the trans jack and test fit it up in the chassis. So it's all bolted up, and I've taken a bunch of measurements based off of uniform points on the chassis, left to right, up and down, etc., off of points of the diff and axle that are detrimental to being square, and all those measurements check out. So we got lots of clearance everywhere. Everything seems to be where exactly it should be. Fits like OEM. And yeah, I think it looks pretty good. So lots of it is still just tacked. Obviously wanted to make sure that everything was good before we went ahead and actually final welded everything. But definitely pumped on how this has turned out. It looks to be fitting exactly the same as the old one that I had in my previous E46. All the areas that were close, all the measurements seem to be pretty much the same. So that's encouraging. A couple areas that I need clearance, and it's no surprise. This section here, there is an air gap. It's a little bit close for comfort. And like I said, this section and this is no longer needed. So there's no issues with getting rid of a little bit of meat there. But yeah, I'm pumped. This is in the car. Looks good. I'm happy with it. So we're gonna yank it out now, put it back in the jig, and final weld everything in there. Sick. subframe all welded up, diffs mounted in the subframe. The last thing I'm doing is checking that our axles actually clear everything. So I've marked somewhere here, and you can see just like holding this kind of flush on the stub. There is an air gap, but it's a little closer than I want it to be. So we're just gonna probably cut a little section out of this, heat it, hammer it down a little bit, and then just re-weld it. So shouldn't have to get rid of any structure, but we should clearance it just a little bit, just because it's a little close for comfort. Once that's done on both sides, then this thing is pretty much 100% done. Oh, for the pumpkin?
Yeah. But it's like super blue, exciting flames that are like,
How do we do it? Hit it with your purse real nice. Alright guys, so we're here at the Slip Club HQ with Brad Carlton, who's been on the same diff since he was 7. Brad, what do you have to say about your diff?
Over engineering everything there, brother.
See, the problem with this is it doesn't have stock S13 axles still.
What you need is not that.
You need, where's your car? Oh dear.
Put it away.
Oh dear. He actually broke the diff and now it's just put away for good. Okay, that is a wrap. Subframe is done. We've test fitted everything that we needed to test fit, and it's ready to go to powder coating now. So the next step in the next video we're going to be doing is fitting our Big Duck Club body kit. So we have all our suspension stuff ordered from FDF. We should be going there hopefully next week to pick that up. They got us some BC coils, the whole front end catalog, and yeah, we're going to go do a little video there, do a shop tour, and we are going to make this car a roller so we can get it to Josh at FabMac. In the meantime, we're gonna light this pumpkin on fire.